Imagine waking up 40,000 years ago with a fever. Not a little fever. Not the kind where you take a pill, drink water, and complain for 2 days. A fever that makes the world shimmer. Your skin burns, your teeth chatter, your thoughts come apart like smoke. Around you, your family watches in silence because they know something you know too. There's no doctor coming, no antibiotics, no vaccines, no surgery in the modern sense. No clean hospital bed, no blood test, no IV drip, no emergency room light flickering above your face. There is only the fire, the smell of animal hides, the hands of people who love you, and whatever knowledge your group has gathered through generations of trial, error, plants, rituals, and luck. Ancient humans were not helpless. They were observant, clever, and deeply social. They knew which leaves soothed pain, which wounds needed washing, which sick people needed warmth, and which places were dangerous. But many diseases were invisible enemies. You could not see bacteria. You could not understand viruses. You could only see the result: a cough that would not stop, a wound that turned black, a child who became too weak to stand. And in that world, some illnesses were not just dangerous. They were almost like predators. One of the oldest killers was infection from wounds. Today, a cut on your hand is annoying. You rinse it, maybe use antiseptic, maybe forget about it entirely. But for ancient humans, even a small injury could become a death sentence. Think about the life of a hunter, a gatherer, a traveler across rough stone and thorny brush, a bite from an animal, a splinter from bone, a gash from a flint tool, a burn from the fire. These were not rare accidents. They were daily hazards. At first, the wound might look manageable. A little blood, a little pain, but then the skin around it reddens, it swells, heat gathers under the flesh, pus forms. The person grows feverish. The infection spreads through the blood, and suddenly the body is no longer fighting a local injury. It is fighting everywhere at once. This is sepsis. And before antibiotics, it was terrifying. The strange thing is that the original wound might have looked small. A scratch on a foot could become an infection that climbed the leg. A broken tooth could seed bacteria into the jaw. A bite from another human during conflict or play or accident could introduce germs the body could not control. For ancient humans, the skin was a wall between life and death. Once that wall was breached, survival depended on the immune system, hygiene, luck, and care from others. A person too weak to walk still needed water, warmth, and protection. Without a group, they were gone. Then there was pneumonia, the silent thief of breath. Picture an ice age night. The wind outside is sharp enough to feel alive. Your group is huddled close, wrapped in hides, smoke drifting from the fire. Someone begins to cough. At first, nobody panics. Coughing is part of life when you breathe smoke, cold air, dust, and damp cave air. But this cough deepens. It rattles. The person's breathing becomes fast and shallow. Their chest hurts. Fever arrives. They cannot lie comfortably. They are drowning, but there's no water around them. Pneumonia can follow other infections, cold exposure, smoke inhalation, or simple bad luck. In the ancient world, it would have been especially deadly for infants, elders, and anyone weakened by hunger. And ancient people were often exposed to the exact things that make respiratory disease worse: crowded shelters, smoky fires, cold nights, wet clothing, and long periods of physical stress. The cruel part is that breathing is the one thing you cannot postpone. You can go without food for a while. You can endure pain. But when your lungs fill with fluid and inflammation, every breath becomes a negotiation. Without antibiotics, oxygen, or advanced care, pneumonia could turn a strong adult into someone too weak to lift their head. And if pneumonia was the fast thief, tuberculosis was the slow ghost. Tuberculosis is ancient. It does not always kill quickly. Sometimes it settles into the body like a shadow, waiting. A person might cough for months. They lose weight. Their cheeks hollow. Night sweats soak their bedding. Blood appears in the spit. The group watches someone slowly disappear while still alive. This would have been especially devastating because ancient communities were small. Everyone mattered. The person who knew where the roots grew, who remembered the migration paths, who could shape tools, who carried stories, who cared for children, could gradually become weaker and weaker. Tuberculosis also has a strange social horror. It spreads through the air, especially when people share enclosed spaces. A cave, a hut, a winter shelter, a smoky room packed with bodies for warmth. These are places of safety, but also places where breath becomes shared. The very closeness that kept humans alive could help disease move from one person to another. Before medicine, there was no way to name the bacterium, no way to isolate it with confidence, no long course of antibiotics. There was only the visible pattern, the wasting body, the endless cough, the sense that something inside had begun consuming the person from within. Another ancient killer came from the gut, dysentery and diarrheal disease. This one sounds less dramatic until you imagine it without clean water. A human body is mostly water, and losing too much too fast is catastrophic. Diarrheal diseases can kill by dehydration with shocking speed, especially in children. In an ancient camp, water might come from a river, a pool, melted snow, a spring, or a place animals also used. One dead animal upstream, one contaminated water source, one mistake in food handling, and sickness could sweep through a group. The symptoms would be brutal. Cramps, fever, weakness, blood in the stool, relentless thirst. The person drinks, but the body cannot hold on to the water. Children become limp. Adults become confused. The group may try broths, rest, or certain plants, but without understanding microbes or electrolytes, many cases would be a race against time. This is one of those diseases that reveals how fragile civilization really is. Much of modern survival comes not from dramatic medicine, but from boring miracles: sewage systems, clean water, soap, food safety, oral rehydration. Remove those, and the ancient world returns very quickly. Then there was malaria, a disease carried by one of humanity's smallest and most persistent enemies, the mosquito. Imagine living near wetlands, rivers, or warm forests, where insects rise in clouds at dusk. A bite feels like nothing, a tiny itch, but days later, the fever arrives in waves, chills so violent the body shakes, then heat, sweat, exhaustion. Then sometimes, a strange calm before it returns again. Malaria is not just a fever. It invades the blood. It can destroy red blood cells, damage organs, and kill children with terrible efficiency. In some regions, it shaped human evolution itself. Traits like sickle cell protection did not spread randomly. They spread because malaria was such a powerful killer that even a dangerous genetic trade-off could offer an advantage. For ancient humans, malaria would have been mysterious because the cause was separated from the effect. The mosquito bite happened quietly. The fever came later. People might notice that certain places brought sickness, that swamps were dangerous, that seasons mattered, but the parasite itself remained hidden. And because malaria can return again and again, it did not only kill, it weakened. It stole energy from hunters, gatherers, mothers, children. It made a person vulnerable to hunger, predators, accidents, and other infections. In the ancient world, weakness itself was dangerous. Another terrifying disease was tetanus. Tetanus often begins with something small: a puncture wound, a thorn, a dirty cut, a splinter, a wound contaminated by soil. The bacteria produce a toxin that attacks the nervous system. The jaw tightens, muscles spasm, the back arches, light and sound can trigger convulsions. The person remains conscious through much of it, trapped inside a body that has become a weapon against itself. This is where the ancient landscape becomes frightening in a new way. Soil, animal dung, rust-colored tools, sharp bones, thorny plants, all were part of daily life. Bare feet and hands were constantly exposed. A hunter stepping on a sharp object, a child falling near a hearth, a woman scraping hides with a small cut on her finger. Any of these could become the beginning of tetanus. Today, vaccination makes tetanus rare in many places. Before vaccination, it was a nightmare. Ancient humans might have recognized the pattern: the locked jaw, the rigid body, the spasms. But recognition is not the same as cure. Then there was rabies, one of the most frightening diseases any human could face. The bite of a sick animal might not seem fatal at first. A wolf, bat, fox, or dog-like animal attacks, the wound heals, and life continues. Then, weeks or months later, the person changes. Anxiety, fever, strange sensations near the bite, difficulty swallowing, fear of water, not because the person hates water, but because trying to swallow triggers unbearable spasms. Confusion follows, agitation, paralysis, death. Rabies is horrifying because once symptoms begin, it is almost always fatal without modern intervention. And ancient humans lived close to animals in ways we rarely do now. They tracked them, butchered them, slept near their sounds, competed with them for caves and carcasses. Later, as humans domesticated dogs, the relationship with animals became even closer, bringing protection and companionship, but also new routes for disease. Imagine the emotional confusion of it. An animal bite is understandable, but a healed bite turning into madness and death months later? That would feel supernatural. Like a curse hiding in the body. Another killer, especially after humans began living in larger settled communities, was smallpox. Smallpox was a disease of crowds, contact, and breath. It likely became a major human threat after populations grew large enough to sustain it. For small nomadic bands, some crowd diseases could burn out quickly. But once humans built villages, stored food, lived near animals, and had more frequent contact with distant groups, new diseases found a home. Smallpox was visually unforgettable. Fever first, pain, then the rash, spots rising across the body, filling with fluid, becoming deep pustules. Survivors could be scarred for life. Many did not survive at all. Before vaccination, smallpox was one of the most devastating diseases humans ever faced. In ancient communities, it could tear through families, leaving survivors marked physically and emotionally. And unlike a predator, smallpox did not need to chase you. It traveled through closeness, through care, through the very act of tending the sick. That is one of the darkest truths about infectious disease. Love can become a bridge. The person who brings water, wipes sweat, holds a child, or prepares the dead may be the next to fall ill. Measles was another disease that became deadly when humans started living in denser populations. Today, many people think of measles as a rash and fever, but that underestimates it. Measles can cause pneumonia, brain inflammation, blindness, and severe complications, especially in malnourished children. It also weakens immune memory, making the body more vulnerable to other infections afterward. For ancient and early agricultural humans, this mattered enormously. Farming could support larger populations, but it also brought new problems. Closer living quarters, poorer diets in some places, more waste, more contact with domesticated animals, and more children clustered together. A virus like measles thrives where there are enough new susceptible people to infect. Imagine a village where one child develops fever and red eyes, then another, then many. The rash appears. Some recover. Some begin coughing more deeply. One child stops responding normally. Another cannot breathe well. The disease moves through the young like fire through dry grass. This is the paradox of human progress. The same settled life that allowed pottery, farming, storage, and eventually cities also created perfect conditions for epidemic disease. Then there was plague. When people hear plague, they usually think of medieval Europe, but plague bacteria are far older than the Black Death. Ancient DNA has shown that forms of plague infected humans thousands of years ago. It traveled through rodents, fleas, and human networks. And as societies became more connected, diseases could move farther. Plague can take different forms. Bubonic plague causes swollen lymph nodes, fever, weakness, and pain. Pneumonic plague infects the lungs and can spread from person to person through respiratory droplets. Septicemic plague enters the blood and can kill rapidly. For ancient people, the signs would have been terrifying. A healthy person develops fever. Swellings appear in the groin, armpit, or neck. The skin may darken. Weakness takes over. Others fall sick. Rodents die nearby. But the connections are not obvious unless a culture has observed the pattern over time. Plague is not just a disease. It is a reminder that humans are part of an ecological web. Fleas, rodents, grain storage, trade routes, climate shifts, settlements, All of these can become pieces of the same deadly puzzle. And finally, one of the most ordinary yet deadly threats: dental disease. A toothache does not sound like it belongs beside plague or smallpox, but before modern dentistry, a bad tooth could kill. Ancient teeth were often worn down by grit in food, tough fibers, stone-ground grains, and constant chewing. Cracks, cavities, abscesses, and gum disease could open pathways for bacteria. At first it is pain, then swelling, then fever. The infection spreads into the jaw, face, neck, or bloodstream. An abscessed tooth can become sepsis. It can block the airway. It can invade bone. Without extraction, drainage, antibiotics, or sterile tools, a problem the size of a pea near the root of a tooth could become fatal. Think about that for a moment. A tiny hidden pocket of infection under a molar could end a human life. Not a saber-toothed cat, not a fall from a cliff, not starvation in winter, a tooth. This is what makes ancient survival so humbling. Humans were brilliant. They made art in caves, crossed oceans, mastered fire, tracked animals across impossible landscapes, and passed knowledge through generations. But inside their bodies were vulnerabilities they could not see. Disease shaped everything. It shaped where people lived, how they buried the dead, how they cared for the sick, how they feared certain places, animals, seasons, and symptoms. It shaped childhood because many children did not survive infections we now prevent. It shaped adulthood because a strong hunter could be brought down by a fever. It shaped elders because every extra year of life was an achievement. And yet, ancient humans kept going. That may be the most powerful part of the story. They did not have modern medicine, but they had each other. Archaeology has revealed ancient individuals who survived serious injuries and disabilities, meaning someone fed them, protected them, and valued them. Compassion is not a modern invention. Care is one of the oldest human technologies. Before hospitals, there were hands. Before pharmacies, there was memory. Before antibiotics, there was the group gathered around the fire, trying everything they knew to keep one person alive for one more sunrise. So, when we think of ancient humans, we often imagine them battling mammoths, storms, predators, and hunger. But some of their deadliest enemies were much smaller. A bacterium in a wound, a virus in a breath, a parasite in a mosquito, a toxin in the soil, a swelling under a tooth. The ancient world was not only dangerous because of what could attack you from outside, it was dangerous because of what could enter quietly, multiply invisibly, and turn the body against itself. And that makes the survival of our species even more extraordinary. Every person alive today descends from people who made it through that world. People who survived fevers with no medicine cabinet, winters with infected cuts, rivers with bad water, mosquito seasons, coughing shelters, tooth pain, epidemics, loss. Your ancestors were not just lucky, they were tough, intelligent, observant, and connected to others who cared whether they lived or died. Modern medicine did not make humans strong. It revealed how strong humans had always been, but it also reminds us of something ancient people understood very well. Life is fragile, breath is precious, and sometimes the smallest enemy can cast the longest shadow.